Opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions, but every Friday night at 9 p.m. you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain deserves a newsroom that puts the facts and your voice first.
Well, and that's what you get on GB News. Lively debates, lively conversation.
And we're not afraid to hold power to account.
And each other. So join me, Andrew Pierce.
And me, Miriam Gates, for Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 on GB News.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m. only on GB News.
5 hosts, 5 opinions, 5 fearless debates, 5 unfiltered takes on the day's news.
5 reasons not to be anywhere else on Saturday night.
This is the Saturday 5. You got me good there. Britain's biggest Saturday night TV show.
It's not a bad brand.
Yeah. Uncensored.
Very, very racy tonight.
On the unpredictable.
What did she say? Can you translate it for us?
And always entertaining.
And how can a country go from being led by William Wallace to Saturday nights from 6 p.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You're going to want to stay tuned, trust me.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Well, get ready for the Late Show live in Washington, a show that will no doubt not just make headlines here in Britain, but all over the world. Bev Turner's going to pop up in just a second's time and tell us why, because across all of the front pages here, Bev, it's Trump to sue the BBC for $1 billion. Yeah. But we've gone and done it, haven't we, here at GB News? We've actually spoken to his lawyer.
We have, actually. This afternoon, Ben Leo had a conversation with him. His lawyer's based down in Florida, and there may be a reason for that. Of course, Donald Trump considers Mar-a-Lago to be his real home when he's not living in the White House, of course. But it might be also to do with the fact that there are slightly different defamation laws in Florida, which means that is the place from which he has enacted. Of course, he's triggered this lawsuit against the BBC. And it's extraordinary because what a week it's been, Patrick. You know, we talk about the BBC so often on GB News and how it should be funded and is it fair? Do they get it right? Do they get it? What do they get right? What do they get wrong? And in the last week, because of the president, he has shaken that institution to its absolute foundation. So many things have happened under the leadership of Tim Davie, which could have seen the end of his career, and he's managed to swerve every single one of them. And now, of course, this, and it might be that this is actually, you know, let's see if it results in completely the end of the BBC in its current model, its business model. We remain to be seen. Anyway, that is tonight's show. Patrick, so I will bid you farewell and good night. This is The Late Show Live with me, Bev Turner. On The Late Show Live tonight.
Would the president have any issue with potentially bringing down the BBC in that manner?
Decisions have consequences.
Donald Trump might just bring down the BBC. The president is suing the corporation for $1 billion over its doctoring of a speech. And in a world exclusive, The Late Show Live has spoken to Trump's lawyer, bringing the defamation case against the BBC.
I think the message is fairly transparent in that the president will hold accountable those that transmit false and fake information.
So it looks like the BBC should be worried. The message is clear. The president is willing to go all the way, but the BBC is still trying to defend the indefensible with no hint of a genuine apology.
But why weren't the mistakes dealt with on Trump, on anti-Semitism, on women's rights?
I'm sure that story will emerge, but for now I'm going to go in and see our team.
But there is some positive news.
Yes, and I know he's fond of GB News, and I think he appreciates the treatment that he receives on GB News, and we hope that it will continue to be fair and accurate reporting.
Well, there you go. The American president apparently is watching GB News, and we're very glad that you are at home this evening as well. Elsewhere.
When you look at people that are, being arrested or threatened to be arrested for memes or posts that they're putting on social media, that's a real concern.
In another Late Show Live exclusive, I spoke early this afternoon to the American version of Ofcom about Trump swinging at the Beeb, and also asked how they view the issue of free speech in the UK and how our government is handling it. We're going to be looking at lots more stories this evening. The Olympics kicking out trans cheats, how the Americans view that free speech in the UK, and a whole lot more. We're live in Washington, just yards from the White House, bringing you the stories that America is talking about and that matter to Britain too, including this. Take a look at Meghan's new show. It's called With Love, Meghan Holiday Celebration. Notice anything missing? I reveal all later. I'm Bev Turner. This is The Late Show Live, and your night is just getting started. So the BBC has been a controversial business model for a while now, with all of us in the UK having to shell out 170 quid. But who would have thought it would be President Donald Trump who would swing a giant axe over its very existence? He is, of course, suing the corporation for $1 billion over the doctored Capitol Hill speech. You're all familiar with it by now. That sort of money could destroy the BBC. Now, of course, this news came after Director General Tim Davie and Head of News Deborah Turness resigned yesterday evening, and here was Deborah Turness this morning.
BBC News is not institutionally biased. That's why it's the world's most trusted news provider.
Why did you fail to deal with the mistakes that were made?
And see my teams. Thank you so much.
Right, we're going in now. Do you think that the journalists are corrupt like President Trump says? Do you think the journalists are corrupt?
Of course our journalists aren't corrupt. Our journalists are hard-working people who strive for impartiality, and I will stand by their journalism.
Is there institutional bias at the BBC?
There is no institutional bias. Mistakes are made, but there's no institutional bias.
But why weren't the mistakes dealt with on Trump, on anti-Semitism, on women's rights?
I'm sure that story will emerge, but for now I'm going to go in and see our team.
Do you think the board acted against you? Do you think the board acted against you?
This way, Deborah.
I'm so sorry, Deborah, but it is institutionally biased. This afternoon, in a world exclusive, Ben managed to grab a chat with Trump's lawyer, Alejandro Brito, and here it is.
Mr. Brito, thank you for your company. Welcome along to The Late Show Live on GB News. First questions first. Can I ask you, please, when President Trump first instructed you for this case, and how angry is he feeling towards the BBC?
Well, we were recently retained to address this situation once we learned of what was transpiring. And with respect to the second question, the president is extremely frustrated, yet adamant in his belief that he is going to hold accountable those that engage in and peddle in false information and untruthful statements. And so he's upset about it for his own benefit and really for the community as a whole, given the fact that institutions such as the BBC have the ability and the free rein to engage in such defamatory conduct.
Okay, and of course the lawsuit is billed as being $1 billion, which is around £700 million roughly. What would President Trump settle at? Because of course we've had previous cases in the US with President Trump, ABC News, CBS, where he sued CBS, for example, for $10 billion and settled at $16 million. What would the figure be for the president to draw a line under this matter?
Well, the figure would be $1 billion is what would initially be sought in the event that the president is forced to proceed with litigation. If ultimately the lawsuit plays itself out, the damages will be based on the evidence that we establish and the harm that's been caused by the BBC's actions. And so it's a process where the president is going to lay out his demand and allow the evidence to establish and support the actual damages that he has suffered, that his reputation has suffered, and that the BBC has caused.
Okay, and that would happen, that case pursuing $1 billion would happen if, the BBC don't respond by Friday. What do you want them to respond with? What are you looking for? What is the president looking for by that Friday deadline?
The letter completely states our position with respect to what transpired, as well as what the president seeks, which are three things. Number one, a full and complete retraction of the defamatory statements made by the BBC. Two, an apology to the president for engaging in such intentional and biased reporting. And three, a monetary settlement proposal to be made by the BBC in order to remedy the financial harm that they caused the president to suffer as a result of their intentional conduct.
Okay, and if they don't respond, you'll pursue this case for the full $1 billion, which you argue is worthy of the reputational and financial harm, yes?
If they don't respond, then we will be left with no alternative but to enforce the president's legal and equitable rights, and it'll be up to the president to decide how and when he seeks to do so.
Okay. Of course, the president he's a big Anglophile. He loves Great Britain. His mother was Scottish as well. And I'm sure he's aware, and you're aware, Mr. Brito, that the BBC is funded by licence fee payers, aka the British public. It's basically a TV tax in the UK, funded by the people of Britain. Does that fact weigh on his decision on the number that you'd settle for? Are you looking for balance where you want to make a statement, you'd settle for a number, but not want to, I guess, sting the great British public who ultimately will be paying any settlement or any fine should it go that far in court?
The president is clearly not seeking to sting or damage the consumers and the public as a whole. In fact, his decision to take legal action and to enforce his rights is not simply for his benefit, but for the community as a whole. Because if the BBC and other institutions can engage in this sort of conduct and damage his reputation and engage in such nefarious conduct, it can happen to anyone.
And I guess, Mr. Brito, if this came to court, the BBC would argue that the president was being insightful. Just playing devil's advocate here, he was being insightful, he was liable for what happened on October the 6th, and I think there was a report some years ago suggesting that if he wasn't the president now, then the DOJ would have enough to go after him on that front. What would your response be to those kind of claims?
The kind of claims that I'm hearing you ask about, if the BBC were to avail itself of those claims, would be highly unfortunate because they would not be grounded in truth. The president clearly was not inciting anyone, and anyone who reads the transcript of what the president actually said, as opposed to what the BBC wanted the viewers to believe he said, would make it abundantly clear that what the president was asking for was a peaceful demonstration, was not seeking to incite any sort of violence, and the broadcast that was aired by the BBC tried to intentionally alter that. And so if, in fact, the BBC seeks to take a position that what the president actually did was to incite violence, that will be demonstrated to be demonstrably false and will only compound the problems that the BBC is confronted with right now.
Okay, and should it go that far, Mr. Brito, the $1 billion which the BBC, you are asking of the BBC, should it go that far, potentially could bring the corporation down. It was, of course, once known and respected worldwide as a renowned media source, a trusted source of truth. Some may argue that's changed over recent years. Would the president have any issue with potentially bringing down the BBC in that manner?
I can't speak for the president as to what his feelings would be with regard to that, but I can note two things. Number one, decisions have consequences, and the act of the BBC was an intentional one, and there are consequences to that. And number two, the BBC tried to bring down the president. That is manifest. And so they need to be called to task for the conduct that they engaged in.
And can I ask you, please, do you think the president, and maybe he's told you verbally, will the BBC be punished in terms of their access to the White House now, maybe flying on Air Force One? Has the president expressed any sign of frustration with the BBC on that front to you and suggested that, maybe the access that they are given privilege to at the moment or previously may be reduced? Is he that angry with the BBC that could happen?
I have not had that specific conversation with the president, and presumably if any of that occurs, we will all see it in real time, but I'm not privy to information that is what is going to take place.
And Mr. Brito, I have to ask, has he, of course, Caroline Levitt, the press secretary yesterday, said everybody should watch GB News. In your conversations with the president since he instructed you to pursue this case against the BBC, has he mentioned GB News at all?
He has, and I know he's fond of GB News, and I think he appreciates the treatment that he receives on GB News, and we hope that it will continue to be fair and accurate reporting.
Just finally, what's your message? What is the president's message to the BBC right now? The executives will surely be watching this interview tonight on The Late Show Live. What's your message to them? What's the president's message to the BBC right at this moment?
I think the message is fairly transparent in that the president will hold accountable those that transmit false and fake information. He believes that there is an institutional bias that's been reflected in the reporting about him, that there has been a lack of impartiality with respect to the reporting that has been engaged in. I think that there's been an intentional ignorance of evidence of bias within the BBC that needs to be remedied through governance arrangements that are fair and appropriate. And I think that those are the messages that we're trying to convey to them at this point in time.
So there you go. Donald Trump is not going to let this go. And let's speak now to former BBC Current Affairs producer and author of the book, The BBC After the Licence Fee, John Medge. Good evening to you. I do wonder whether your book has become... The title of your book is somewhat prophetic now, The BBC After the Licence Fee. Do you think that you are going to look at the BBC dismantled by this under the hammer of Donald Trump?
No, I mean, it may be pathetic, but look, this is a land of fantasy. Donald Trump has stopped trying to invade Venezuela. He's stopped trying to make world peace. He's going to invade the BBC. That's what he wants to do. You know, he's bullying, he's intimidated. It's worked in the USA. He's got PBS on its knees. He's got NPR on its knees. But normally the BBC would say, "Hi, Donald, bring it on. Let's take you on. Come to court." But everybody's afraid of Donald Trump. This is the playground bully these days in the media. I mean, let's think of the resignations of Tim Davie, who, by the way, is the fourth of the last 5 director generals to leave the institution in a coffin, or a coffin be prepared for him. So what a job, eh? You know, was there an almighty row last week? Did Deborah Turnus want to actually issue a simple statement saying we made a mistake on the Trump interview, which they did. Nobody denies that, but she wasn't allowed to do that by the Board of Governors. Why was that? Is there a right-wing clique in the Board of Governors that actually wants to see the BBC fall down? Robbie Gibb, plus the right-wing papers, plus you, plus others like you. You know, you want to see the BBC not there. Now, the BBC was very slow because the Prescott memo. Is it not true? You don't want to see the BBC out of existence to keep you honest, ma'am?
I would love to see the BBC in existence. I would, but I think some of its entertainment programmes are amazing. You know, family viewing, Strictly. You can name all the shows that it does beautifully. But I have been so frustrated by watching BBC News give one distorted, biased version of almost every major story. I tuned onto that in spring 2020. I wasn't alone in that. And it might have been that the BBC always was the government mouthpiece of the day. But from spring 2020, all my faith in the BBC News department disappeared. I'd love to get it back, John, but I have no faith that it will. I don't know how they do it.
Well, the public don't think so. The polls show that the public trusts the BBC still. They still trust the BBC all over the world, much more so than they trust you, Bev, the GB News. So, you know, let's not exaggerate too much. But this is a big crisis for the BBC, which they need to handle better than they're doing at the moment. They don't handle it. You don't handle it by delaying, as they've done for a week. You don't handle it. I mean, the chairman of the BBC today said in an interview, Trump is not suing us. At that precise moment, a letter arrived, or had arrived the day before, saying, I'm suing you. So, you know, what's happening there? You know, let's look, the whole question of the license fee is up for grabs in the next year. It's 174 quid. You know, will it be renewed, or is there a better way? Is there a way where you have a basic license fee for everything, and then the other side of the iPlayer, you have subscription? Because if you make great programs, people will pay for it. That's the lesson. So what the BBC has to do is continue to make good, true, great programs and news programs that everybody believes and everybody trusts. So, you know, it's not difficult. It's been doing it for 104 years now. So it knows what to do.
But the ideology is the ideology that underpins so much of what the BBC does on all the major issues, whether it's climate change, whether it's legal migration, whether it's illegal migration, whether it was Brexit, everything during the pandemic. They have taken one particular view and failed the British public, because what they offer as fact is one very clear version of events. If you can write me a list of 10 main topics, I will tell you the BBC's explicit position on those topics. And here at GB News, we allow both sides of the story. I mean, you're here, John, because
I'm your
viewers...
Ofcom. Yes, I'm your SOP to Ofcom. You know, come on. Look, I worked in the BBC. The BBC bends over backwards, to be fair. Absolutely bends over backwards. You've got people who are probably Tories, who are producers, who actually, you know, bend over. They make sure everybody gets to say. So I don't accept that. You know, there's a thing called producer guidelines.
Here's the difference.
Which should keep you.
Here's the difference. Here's the difference. GB News will have on ex-BBC on a day like this because we want to hear your opinion and we love the debate. The BBC would never have on a GB News presenter to give a different version of this story, or any story, John. That's just a fact.
In the last 24 hours, you've seen quite a lot of anti-BBC people on the BBC. You know, I've seen David
Not from
Elsie.
GB News.
No, not from you, but perhaps they don't take you seriously enough.
Why not?
That's the reason. Well, you know,
why not? Why not?
They go for the David Elsie and they go for the critics. They're happy to put on the critics. I don't know why they don't take you seriously enough, because maybe they don't think you're heavyweight enough, or you've got too much of skin in the game. Your game is to get rid of the BBC.
No, my friend, it is not. It is to serve the British public fairly in the news landscape. What was it he said about the delicate ecology of the news landscape? And unfortunately, we have disrupted that. And lots of channels are not happy about that, but we will proudly have all voices on this channel, and that's what we're doing, and that is why you are here, John. And you could say, well, I'm only here because of Ofcom. No, you're here because it makes for much more interesting TV if we can have a broad church of opinions on this channel.
But Bev, the BBC, being fair and impartial, has actually left room for you on the right. You know, you accept that you are a right of centre channel. And the BBC being strictly impartial.
I am not right-wing. I am not. John, I consider myself I consider myself very apolitical. I've never been a member of a political party. I never intend to be a member of a political party. And apparently the pandemic happened, and when I came out the other side, the political tectonic plates had shifted beneath my feet, and anyone that believed in the sovereignty of the individual was suddenly rendered right-wing by other people who look at things through that political prism.
Why do you think
I don't subscribe to that.
All right, well, you know,
say again.
I watch you occasionally, and I must admit, I do think you're rather right of centre. You know, Jacob Rees-Mogg, you know, Nigel Farage, these are not raving lefties, are they? Or are they?
But it's so interesting because, well, yes, they are members of what might be termed in the old-fashioned phrase right-wing parties. A lot of people would say that the Conservative Party is no longer right-wing anyway. But, John, that's a debate for another day. I always enjoy talking to you. Thank you so much. We have run out of time. Thank you, John Mayer there. Author of the book, The BBC After...
He won't be allowed to invade the BBC.
All right. OK, thank you, John. Let me know your thoughts at home. gbnews.com/your say. Well, BBC Chair Samir Shah to the Culture Select Committee is going to be talking. We're going to be looking at what they had to say. Still to come on The Late Show Live.
This isn't just about the latest doctoring of a documentary about Donald Trump. It's about the way the BBC has continually covered issues of sex and gender. A lot of women out there believe that the BBC is institutionally biased against them. A lot of Jewish people believe that the BBC is institutionally biased against them.
The BBC is in crisis mode after President Donald Trump threatened legal action against them. We'll have all the latest updates. This is The Late Show Live, only on GB News.
A really important thing about GB News. It's brought something completely different to the landscape.
The mainstream is all about keeping the status quo as it is, ticking along quite nicely. They don't want to ask difficult questions.
GB News exists because there is a desperate need for fearless journalism that puts the people first.
GB News came on the scene as a disruptor, and it has always been a disruptor ever since.
Journalism in this country has been a cosy world full of groupthink until now.
Well, the reality is that most British journalists are afraid. That's not GB News.
Journalism is journalism at the end of the day, and we're not here to serve any masters. Our masters are our audience.
We're here to talk about things in a way that have never been broadcast on British airways before.
Do not miss a moment on GB News.
The #1 news channel in the country.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m. only on GB News.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m. weekdays here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
The BBC is important. I think BBC World Service is actually very, very important. And I think the BBC should get back to doing news, but just to doing straight news. If it can manage that, it has something of a future. If it can't manage that, frankly, it has no future at all.
So that was Nigel Farage talking today about the BBC being in crisis mode after President Donald Trump has threatened them with this legal action. We're going to bring you all the updates as we get them this evening. Now, a senior White House official has told the Daily Telegraph the White House may consider restricting the BBC's access to open press if events due to the admission of their falsely doctoring President Trump's words. And to tell me all about this is Telegraph's chief US correspondent, Rob Crilly. Rob, slightly gave your story away there. I wanted you to come in and tell me that. Right, we sat here a week ago. Is it a week?
I've lost track.
A lot has happened in a week with this story, Rob Crilly, and it all started with your newspaper and that dodgy dossier. So, your thoughts now as we get a week after this. Can you believe what's happened?
Well, it's been an extraordinary week, hasn't it? So my colleague Gordon Rayner got the whistleblowers report laying out all the problems with bias and question marks over the BBC's coverage. Centering the number one story, of course, was the way it had covered Donald Trump's January 6th speech, the way it had spliced together several different moments to give the impression that he had called on his supporters to march on the Capitol and fight.
Yeah.
In fact, it turned out to be rather different. Things then took a turn on Friday when I interviewed Caroline Levitt, and she said, she called the BBC nothing more than a left-wing propaganda machine, and really came out fighting. And then we had a weekend of turmoil. The Director General, the head of news, resigned. And then today, of course, we get the letter that you've been covering, the lawyer's letter threatening a $1 billion lawsuit against the BBC if they don't retract the story and the comments, apologise and pay a decent chunk of compensation. So I was in at the White House today. I spoke to a senior White House official and I said, well, look, you have out-muscled other news organisations. The Wall Street Journal is banned from Air Force One. The Associated Press has been banned from Air Force One. What does this mean for the BBC? And they said, well, this is something we're going to consider, whether or not the BBC and their reporters should be allowed to cover open press events. These are the big events, the press conferences, the arrivals and departures of head of states, all the big moments at the White House. And of course, we've seen time and time again that if the president thinks you are not covering him fairly, he's not afraid to step in and say, okay, you don't get to cover me anymore. So I think there's some way to go before we're at that stage. The lawyer's letter to the BBC gives the BBC until Friday to respond to these demands for the apology and compensation. But I think if we get past there and there isn't a decent settlement, then I could see some sort of restrictions on the BBC.
And do you know these BBC journalists in Washington, and how frightened are they that they may be banned from this access to the White House and these briefing rooms, etc.?
It's a small world, as you know. We all know each other. Look, I think they're still trying to work out what's happening, and I think the problem for them is they're on the front line. The BBC's Washington bureau, they're up against the White House every single day of the week. And what they're getting to grips with is some decisions made not just by Panorama, not just by the BBC in London, but actually an outside production company that was responsible.
October Films.
For the
Who,
episode
by the way,
in
have
question.
removed any reference to this Panorama documentary from their website. Because I did go looking to see who actually made it. It's a small world in TV as well as media, and I thought I might know some of these people. There's no reference to it online now.
So I think the feeling inside the Washington bureau here is that they're under siege. They're not sure what's going to happen. They're on the front line. Are they getting the support they want from editors and executives in London? I'm not sure that's the question for them. But once again, it's always the reporters out in the field who have to ask the tough questions, and they're the ones wondering, are we going to pay for these decisions?
And people watching this at home, and some of them quite rightly would say, well, hang on a minute, do you mean that Donald Trump has got rid of people from the press corps here in DC that don't support him? Who is he? Putin? How does he get that balance right? Because you've worked there, you write stories about him. Do you feel you can only write positive stories about Donald Trump and his government?
No, I mean, I don't, and I think most of the people in the White House press corps don't feel that way.
Right.
But the reality is, the Wall Street Journal has been banned from Air Force One because of its coverage of his relationship with Epstein. The Associated Press Express was banned from Air Force One and other events because they wouldn't adopt his preferred terminology of the Gulf of America rather than the Gulf of Mexico. So I do think this is an administration in an unprecedented way is prepared to throw its weight around, and I think there probably is some self-editing going on, and people probably are a little concerned about the way they come across.
There is, of course. There was an incident just recently in Washington where the Pentagon journalists actually rebelled against Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, wasn't there? Because do you know the detail of that story, Rob? That they expected them to adhere to certain rules?
Well, so the issue here is they were expected to sign up to kind of various terms, which would have stopped them reporting in a fair way. Like, my whole job is to get the stories the White House, the Pentagon, the State Department, any politician doesn't want me to report. And I got the sense that at the Pentagon they'd gone rather further, and they were stopping reporters getting anything other than the official releases.
And they literally clubbed together and went on strike almost, didn't they, the journalists at the Pentagon?
But I think the upshot is they're out, you know, and now there are certain approved news organisations, fairly minor, obscure ones. They're the only ones that are able to report from the Pentagon.
OK, thank you, Rob. No doubt I will see you in the next couple of days, because this story is not going away.
It's not going away. I will be in a couple of days' time, I'm sure.
All right, thank you. Let me know what you think at home, won't you? Right, still to come on The Late Show Live tonight.
When you look at people that are, being arrested or threatened to be arrested for memes or posts that they're putting on social media, that's a real...
So it's another Late Show Live exclusive tonight. I spoke to America's version of Ofcom earlier this afternoon. They are concerned about free speech in the UK. First, though, the American president is set to kick out the head of the Centre for Countering Digital Hate after he is accused of stifling free speech. I think you will love this story. This is The Late Show Live only.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster, the ultimate clique. And you're fighting like rats in a sack. But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask. OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician. Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off-limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah,
as I say, now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
No matter the state it's in, this is our nation. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for a genuine, honest discussion on where we have been, where we are going, and where we are with the people who set the direction. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News.
Britain deserves a newsroom that puts the facts and your voice first.
Well, and that's what you get on GB News. Lively debates, lively conversation.
And we're not afraid to hold power to account.
And each other. So join me, Andrew Pierce.
And me, Miriam Gates, for Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 on GB News.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk then?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact that Trump made a good start, no.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m. weekdays, here only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to The Late Show Live. I am Bev Turner. Thank you for joining me. So the White House is set to revoke the visa of the boss of a campaign group founded by Sir Keir Starmer's Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney. So the Chief Executive for the Centre for Countering Digital Hate is called Imran Ahmed, could be deported from the US after his charity pushed for restrictions on what could be published online. So joining me now is Washington correspondent for The Telegraph, Connor Stringer. You wrote this story today, Connor, and I saw it in the paper and I saw your name next to it and I thought you are the man to talk to because I love this story. Because this is Donald Trump not messing around when it comes to free speech. Who is this guy and why does he want to see the back of him?
So as you mentioned, Imran Ahmed is a bit of a character actually, and he's been on the crosshairs of this administration for a little bit of a while. He, as you said, helped co-found this organisation called the Centre for Countering Digital Hate. And basically what they've done is kind of campaign for greater censorship, the deplatforming of some of the administration's more, shall we say, highbrow administration officials who have caused a little bit of a stir, like promoting anti-vaccine theories, etc., etc. And with that, they have essentially found themselves in the crosshairs of Donald Trump, and who is, you know, a real free speech advocate. This administration are really, really wary of this, and now he finds himself at quite literally the top of a list of people who are going to have their visa revoked.
So he's a British citizen,
right?
Is he? I
Yes,
don't know.
absolutely
Yeah,
correct,
he must be British. And so he's lived out here. He has this organisation set up with Morgan McSweeney. Now Morgan McSweeney is incredibly influential in 10 Downing Street. And the idea that somebody so close to the Prime Minister is deemed so problematic to this American government that they would boot him out has surely got to make political... there's got to be ramifications of that in the UK with Starmer, surely.
Well, I think this is part of the messaging, Bev, if I'm honest. I think obviously it's politically somewhat dangerous, but also a little bit naughty to just go straight and say, look, we're doing this for political reason. It's all about messaging, right? They know where they're firing this bullet across the bow, and it's pretty close to Sir Keir Starmer's top men, and that will be part of that. Those that I speak to who told me about this story say this is all about getting, as they call it, a scalp, someone that they can show and say, look, we're serious about this. This needs to stop now. And we're going to keep taking action if it continues. And
did he have a row with Elon Musk, this chap, Imran Ahmed?
You're right. So some years ago, actually, towards the end of 2023, 2024, they produced, as part of their kind of documents and various research that they do, some findings that suggested that since Elon Musk took over Twitter, or formerly or now known as X, that the amount of hate speech rocketed, and they kind of tied him directly to that. Elon Musk wasn't very happy, tried to sue them. The case was eventually thrown out by a judge. However, that put them in the crosshairs of a very powerful man, and a man who, as we know, is still pretty cosy with the president. He was extremely cosy until a couple of months ago. So it doesn't surprise me that this individual finds himself at the top of a list somewhere.
Now, what would Imran Ahmed say? What would he say his position is on this? What is he trying to do with his campaign? What's it called? The Centre for Countering Digital Hate. I mean, the name alone winds me up because, you know, what do you mean by hate?
Well, I think it's very similar. Their position is very similar to what the Online Safety Act is, right? And that is essentially trying to reduce the amount of hate speech, deplatforming individuals that seem to kind of spread disinformation, those that stir up hatred. Really off the back of kind of what we saw with Southport and other kind of various high-profile incidents, we've seen this kind of come to the fore, and it's essentially the position of the Online Safety Act. We don't want to necessarily be proactive in censorship, but we will encourage censure with particular individuals that we find problematic.
And did you, as a newspaper, try to contact Imran Ahmed?
We did, but I couldn't reach him, and I've tried again last night as well. I will keep doing so. I'm very keen to see what Mr. Ahmed thinks of this. I mean, as from what I understand, he lives in DC. He has a family. I mean, regardless of what the implications of this has, it's extremely problematic. He faces now uprooting his whole family from DC, where he's lived for some time, as I understand it. So I'm very keen to see what he thinks about this, and if he perhaps thinks like there's an element of changing course or an apology to be made that will appease Donald Trump.
Right. Thank you, Connor. Great to see you. Still to come this evening on The Late Show Live.
We look forward to the government reopening this week so Congress can get back to our regular legislative session. We have a lot of business to do, as you all know.
So the American Senate has begun a series of votes towards ending this shutdown here in America, but has it ignited a civil war amongst the Democrats? Also on the show tonight, the Olympics is considering banning transgender women from competing in women's sports. If they've not done that already, lots to get into. This is The Late Show Live, only on GB News.
GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk then?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact that Trump made a good start, no.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I got up? About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akua, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised. I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes and Kerr weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to The Late Show Live. Thank you very much for joining me. I want to introduce my panel to you this evening because we've had such a busy show, fellas. You've been waiting so patiently. I've got Thomas Corbett-Dillon here with me and Eric Ham. We're going to be discussing a huge amount. Just very briefly, Thomas, is Trump going to let up on the BBC, or is he? When will he be happy?
I don't think he will, and I think my favourite part of this story is what he's done with his other funds is he's going to put it towards the ballroom. So if they have to give him, $1 million, something, it'll go to the ballroom. That's going to really upset them.
Eric, is he right to be pursuing the BBC in this manner?
I don't know if he's right, but I do believe that this is deeply, deeply problematic, particularly given the fact that this documentary came out just before an election. So the possibility that it could have swayed votes one way or the other, and the fact that we're now learning that the information was spliced, I think it was a bad call. And I do believe that there needs to be an investigation on how something like this happened, particularly at such a storied media and news organization.
OK, super. Right, I want to also hear from you this evening. Get in touch with me, of course, gbnews.com/your say. You will be with me, gentlemen, until 2 o'clock. Now, the International Olympic Committee is making decisions about whether trans people should be allowed to compete in the Olympics. So let's talk now to Sue Wong of Scene in Sport. Sue, good evening. Thank you for joining me. So what's happening now? When you hear that the Olympic Committee is considering banning trans women, it begs the question, do you mean they haven't done so already? What's stopping them, Sue?
Good evening. Well, at Scene in Sport, we're a network of sports insiders who champion fair sport. So we very much welcome this news. And that is a very good question. Why haven't they done it already? But the first thing I would say is there is no ban. We're not banning anybody. The IOC are not looking at banning anybody. What you're looking at is making sure that everyone is eligible for the correct category. For example, you can't have heavyweights identifying into a lightweight category. You can't have adults identifying into a children's category. What they're doing is protecting fairness back into the female category. And this is really important because without it, if you don't protect it, it's unsafe, it's unfair, and women get excluded. So this really
and so what are the sticking points then, Sue, around that? Because does it raise questions such as, is somebody post-transition, have they had surgery, have they not? Did they have puberty blockers as a child that might have minimised their testosterone? Is it just that the IOC are very stuck in the weeds of this issue?
It's been a very, very bizarre concept because we all know that women are not men with low testosterone. Women are not short men. Women have their own category and women deserve fair sport. So there's a recent UN report that said there have been over 600 athletes, female athletes, who've lost out on nearly 900 medals to male athletes. And that's over 29 different sports. And the thing is that you may just think, oh, well, this is just about elite sport, about the Olympics. But this IOC policy, which has been poor leadership for decades, that has an impact on grassroots level because the IOC policy influences world sports bodies, it influences the Paralympics, it influences national governing bodies. So that means it influences at the grassroots level, so at local clubs and for you and me.
Yeah. Sue, thank you so much. Sue Wong there. I'm going to bring in now Benjamin Butterworth in our London studio. Benjamin, good news, right? Good evening to you. Great news that the IOC are looking like they're going to finally put people in the right categories, to use Sue's terminology, rather than ban people who were born male from swimming against females.
I mean, I have to say, you know, I obviously have transgender friends and care a lot about trans rights. And I've never, ever heard a trans person say equality would mean that I could be an Olympic athlete in a different category. It wasn't really at the top of anybody's radar. But I do think that sometimes this is used as a bit of a baton to beat ordinary trans people that are trying to get on with their lives. And there are some ridiculous examples, like the darts, Britain's darts organisation banned trans women. And I kind of think, well, what difference does that make? And chess, they also made a similar ruling. So I think there are some places where it seems unfair.
Really? In darts?
Well, I mean, look, I'm not going to claim to know much about darts now I've said that, but, you know, there are clearly sports where it's more about the mind or the skill level that's not necessarily physical, right? I don't think it's really the strength of the arm, is it? It's the precision.
Yeah. Yeah, it is, Benjamin. Because if you think about it, if we played darts, clearly I'd beat you. But that's probably because my biceps are stronger than yours, maybe. It is. I walked into that, didn't I? But no, but that's because I probably have stronger biceps. But no, I think you should always be in the category of which you were born. And your friends who are trans, they're not going to care, are they? Are they going to care whether someone with a willy is swimming in the women's 100 metres front crawl?
Well, the whole point is that they don't, they didn't wake up at 12 years old when they realised they were trans and worry about whether they could be an Olympic swimmer. However, the idea that ordinary people going about their lives then face consequences of a sort of anti-trans riot that seems to be popular online at times, I think that does upset them, and that is a problem. And sometimes people are pretty insensitive to personal situations that people are trying to go through. And frankly, a trans athlete has expressed a lot more self-discipline and motivation and ambition than most of us have ever managed, so they shouldn't be criticised.
Well, I think somebody who's born male who takes part in a female sports event is not being very kind and considerate about the feelings of the other women in that event. Anyway, Benjamin, I'm going to talk to you plenty in the next hour, so stay with me. Still to come in the Late Show Live, I spoke to America's version of Ofcom. Fascinating conversation, and they are concerned about free speech in the UK. Here's your weather.
Today, clouds overhead. Total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Yet more windy and wet weather is expected today, particularly across western parts of the UK. The hills of southwest England, South Wales, southwest Scotland and Northern Ireland seeing quite a soaking as spells of rain push north and east across the UK. Briefly drier across the southern third, although staying cloudy and in some places with further spots of rain. But the strong wind coming in from the southwest will send another band of persistent wet weather into South Wales and the southwest of England by the afternoon. Driest and clearest in the far north of Scotland, 10 degrees here, elsewhere mid-teens. So despite the wet and windy weather, it is actually very mild for the time of year. Now, across northern Scotland, well, that's the place to be because we're going to end the day with clear spells, 1 or 2 showers, but otherwise mostly dry weather. As this spell of rain moves through central Scotland, another bout of wet weather pushing through Northern Ireland into the southwest of Scotland, reaching the central belt around 6 or 7 p.m. And then this wet weather moving through western England and Wales, a very soggy end to the day for Cardiff, for Exeter, and then that sweeps through the Midlands into eastern England through the evening, although fizzling out, so not much rain really for the southeast. A very mild night for the vast majority with that strong wind and areas of cloud in the south. Temperatures staying up at 14 or 15 Celsius, single figures further north, and having seen a dry day in northern Scotland on Tuesday, we're going to see spells of rain through Wednesday and a strong wind developing, but this wind is coming from the north, so it's going to turn colder through the day across Shetland and then eventually the north of the mainland as well as Orkney. Some of that rain turning to snow over the tops of the mountains, for example. A clear slot in the middle across Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, northern England, but further wet weather in the south where it's going to be very mild once again.
Today, clouds overhead. Total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
isn't it?
No,
Because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes and Kerr weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave. I'm so surprised. I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There, you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster, the ultimate clique. And you're fighting like rats in a sack. But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask. OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician. Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits. You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless. But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show. Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Tom Harwood. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The President of the United States is threatening to sue the BBC for $1 billion. I'm going to have one of his closest advisors in the studio with me very soon. I'm Bev Turner, this is The Late Show Live. Welcome to the second hour. No ad breaks, remember. Let's go back to our top story tonight. The BBC is in crisis after the President threatened the broadcaster with a $1 billion legal suit after the editing of that panorama speech with which you're all now very familiar. His legal team is accusing the corporation of defaming the President and has demanded a retraction, giving the broadcaster until Friday evening, 5 p.m. DC time, 10 p.m. UK, to respond.
Would the President have any issue with potentially bringing down the BBC in that manner?
Decisions have consequences.
And earlier I spoke to the chairman of the Federal Communications Commission of the US, basically America's Ofcom, Brendan Carr.
When you look at people that are, being arrested or threatened to be arrested for memes or posts that they're putting on social media, that's a real concern.
Absolutely fascinating conversation with that man. You do not want to miss it. I'm also going to be looking at lots more stories, the Olympics kicking out the trans cheats, how the Americans view free speech in the UK, and a whole lot more. We are live, of course, in Washington, DC. Just yards from the White House, bringing you the stories that America is talking about and that matter to Britain too, including this.
The country loses a lot of money when they do this, and they're not getting much, but nobody gets a lot. But it's terrible. What they really wanted was $1.5 trillion for people that came in illegally.
That was just moments ago, President Donald Trump weighing in on this historic government shutdown. The Senate here in Washington is beginning a series of votes on a deal to end it, which would mean museums will reopen, the zoo will reopen, and people who work for the government will start getting paid again. It's a big deal here in America. Also tonight, this. This is Meghan's new show. It's called With Love Meghan. It's a holiday celebration. What's missing? Let's talk about that. I'm Bev Turner. This is The Late Show Live, and welcome to the second hour. No ad breaks, remember. Back to our top story tonight. The BBC is, of course, in crisis after American President Donald Trump threatened the broadcaster with a $1 billion legal action over the editing of his speech in the Panorama documentary. His legal team is accusing the corporation of defaming the president. They've demanded a retraction, giving the BBC until Friday evening to respond.
The president is extremely frustrated, yet adamant in his belief that he is going to hold accountable those that engage in and peddle in false information and untruthful statements. And so he's upset about it. for his own benefit and really for the community as a whole, given the fact that institutions such as the BBC have the ability and the free rein to engage in such defamatory conduct.
So that was Alejandro Brito, and Ben Leo spoke to him this afternoon. We showed that in the first hour. If you want to see that interview, do go onto the GB News app or onto YouTube, where you can catch up on the first hour of the show. My panel is still here with me, Thomas Corbett-Dillon and Eric Ham. Good to have you both here. We have talked about this tonight, but I just want another line from you both on this. Is Donald Trump right to be pursuing taxpayer British money in this way, Thomas?
Well, I think it is, because, you know, it's kind of crazy that this is the first time the BBC's really had pushback. You know, how many times have they done this in the past for various things? I mean, we know when they covered, for example, Boris Johnson, when they covered Brexit, how you know, do we know if all the programs were edited properly? We need to go through and have a look at all this. So I think he's doing the right thing. And as I said earlier, I think my favorite part is that any money that he gets, he's going to spend on his new ballroom. So, you know, that'll be put to good use. It'll be helping the American people.
Eric, the idea in the UK that the BBC is impartial, they give two sides to every story, I don't recognise that definition of the BBC. You work for them from time to time. What's your assessment of how they broadcast news?
Oh, I think here in the United States, many people see the BBC as an impartial and it's actually one of the running jokes is a real news organization. And actually, I was on the BBC today talking about this very story. And this is, I think, deeply problematic because, again, people look to key media organizations like the BBC for their news to be informed. And clearly, this was a massive, massive fail by the BBC. And I think more so than what Donald Trump is doing, because Donald Trump's been on a win going after many of these news organizations, I think. But more than that, I think the bigger question that really needs to be answered is, how did this happen and why?
How damaging then do you think this story is to the BBC in America, Thomas? Because quite right, like Eric, I chat to people in DC all the time, and the taxi drivers say, "Oh, we love the BBC," when they hear my accent. I go, "Oh, there are alternatives," you know. But it does still have that reputation for being credible. I think partly because we don't have adverts. To state the obvious, obviously American television is just basically the TV sections of shows. There's a couple of seconds between very, very long adverts, isn't it? And I think they look at the BBC and that seems sort of anachronistic. Like it's from another time that you would have a channel without TV commercials in it. But how damaging will this be when people see that Donald Trump is suing them? Will that help them or hinder them?
Well, I think, you know, the BBC first started having trouble over here in the first Trump administration, and then, of course, as I believe, a lot of the left-wing people that are at the BBC were so excited about Biden, and there's the famous clip of them saying, you know, comment for the BBC, and he says, "I'm not talking to the BBC, I'm Irish." So, you know, they've had no luck in the last, 3 administrations. They've been struggling. But I think, yeah, you're right. Americans do think that the BBC is, I think they still think of what it used to be. We know as Brits that it is not that. It hasn't been that for a while, which is a real shame. I think it's been taken over by particularly the younger people that are working in there. They're so obsessed about politics now. They really it's almost impossible to be impartial. So I think that's a real shame. But you talk about ads. You should go, while you're here, go and look at the BBC website. You would be mistaken. It almost looks like the Daily Mirror, the amount of ads they've got on the website. So, this idea that the BBC cannot make money, I'm surprised they're not. If you really want to do the license fee, open it up and let Americans pay the $9.99 a month and watch stuff.
I still feel nostalgic when I think about the BBC, and then I think about everything they've got wrong since March 2020, and my sympathy starts to wane away. I'm a very forgiving person, though. Are you? gbnews.com/yoursay. Do get in touch with me. Now, earlier I spoke to the chairman of the Federal Communications Commission of the United States. Now, this is the equivalent of Ofcom in the UK. Interesting conversation. I hope you enjoy it. His name is Brendan Carr. Here it is. Which brings us neatly onto the BBC and, of course, the conflict which is now ensuing between President Trump and the BBC over this malicious, he would say, this deliberate editing of events on January the 6th to depict Trump as inciting violence. When you look at that story, Brendan, and the way that the BBC chose to broadcast that edit 1 week before the election, do you see it as deliberately propagandizing a documentary?
I think that the BBC is going through a real crisis in credibility right now. I think this most recent episode is one that is gaining a lot of attention, I think rightly so. But if you step back and look at their coverage of a lot of issues, Gaza and otherwise, there's been a lot of concerns about the decisions that they've been made and whether they sort of live up to the broad standards that they're supposed to be living up to, and particularly when the British government is asking households all across your country to subsidize and pay for that. And so I think what they're doing is a real problem. And look, it's part of a broader trend where, President Trump here in America ran directly at these legacy news media outlets and effectively smashed the facade that they can tell these one-sided stories or make up things that didn't happen. And for years, people just let them get away with it. And President Trump, for the first time, has been standing up to that. And there's all sorts of consequences that flow from President Trump's decision. Again, we're seeing in the midst of a real massive shift in media and media credibility here in America, where people are finding other outlets that aren't necessarily legacy ones. I think you're seeing that in Britain as well. I mean, at the end of the day, polling shows that people have a lot more trust in gas station sushi than they do in some of these legacy news media outlets. And I think that's exactly what you're running into with the BBC right now.
The way this story is pivoting now, particularly in the UK, is that it is inappropriate for an American president to tell the British public what to watch. It is inappropriate for him to become involved in the way that our media is broadcast, and it is inappropriate for him to hold the national broadcast channel to ransom to the tune of potentially $1 billion, that he should not be doing that as a politician. What's your response to that accusation?
I think President Trump has every right to speak up when he sees coverage that isn't fair. If there's coverage that ends up being actionable, whether it's libel or slander, then he has every right to stand up for himself. We're seeing him do it here in America as well. He's had lawsuits against various companies here in the U.S. There's been settlements when those companies found that it was credible claims or otherwise justified entering into a settlement agreement. So, yeah, I think he has every single right to speak up. And the concerns that he's raised regarding these BBC edits, it's really serious. And I'm very interested to see how the BBC responds. I'm interested to see how potentially the legal system, either there in the UK or elsewhere, wherever President Trump ends up pursuing this litigation, has it pan out. But I think it's important that, again, across the board, across the pond, both there and here, probably the first time in a long time, broadcasters are sitting there thinking, we have to at least attempt to comply with this public interest standard. We have to at least attempt to be broadly appealing to the viewing audiences.
Let me ask you about a really interesting story that's in the newspapers only today, and this is about the Center for Countering Digital Hate here in the US, which is run by a guy called Imran Ahmed, and his campaign has basically called on defunding and censoring anybody that was counter-narrative throughout the pandemic as well. Elon Musk tried to take him to court, and we now understand that Donald Trump is considering revoking his visa so that he can no longer be in America and pushing such anti-free speech rhetoric. Do you agree with taking that sort of action on individuals?
Well, being here in America, if you're not an American citizen, is a privilege in most cases, not a right. And I think the Department of State and Secretary Rubio have been very clear about some of the actions that they're going to take consistent with that viewpoint. And again, stepping back, with the exception of broadcast TV that has that public interest license, we want wide open, robust debate, particularly on social media. We didn't see that. Particularly here in America during the Biden years, we saw a real crackdown on online free speech. You saw it with the Biden administration reaching out directly to social media companies to try to get them to pressure companies to take down what we have as First Amendment protected speech. And you saw it with this particular organization that you mentioned being part of that effort globally, because there was a real global effort to shut down free speech on social media, again, which is not a place that has a public interest standard, right? We want everyone to be able to participate in the digital town square. And so I think we've been very concerned with the evidence and information that's coming out about some of these organizations, including participation with the government, to tilt the playing field towards restrictive, censored speech on the internet.
And when you look at the UK and you see stories that are emerging over there of record numbers of people being arrested for social media posts, and we have increasing restrictions on digital content and access to that content, how do you feel about the state of the UK compared to here?
Well, look, it's deeply concerning. When you look at people that are, being arrested or threatened to be arrested for memes or posts that they're putting on social media, that's a real concern. We want to be able to have, robust, wide open political debates on the internet. And the turn that we're seeing over there towards censorship is a real concern. It makes me glad that I'm here in America at the end of the day. But it's not just a phenomenon that's in the UK. We see it in Brazil as well, where they have a Supreme Court justice there who's been effectively censoring social media posts that are contrary, in his view, to his political party, in my view. From being elected at the ballot box, that's a problem. So I think where we're seeing things go in the UK towards online censorship is really scary.
So that was Brendan Carr there from the FCC, the America's equivalent of Ofcom. There's a longer version of that interview which you can find on gbnews.com and on our YouTube channel. Now I'm still joined in the studio by Eric Ham and political consultant Thomas Corbett Dillon this evening. So, Thomas, do we have a free speech problem in the UK compared to here? The difference is so stark when you hear a man like Brendan Carr there, who is responsible for making sure that the information which is broadcast and transmitted in this country is not offensive, etc. It is accurate. I just want him to go and run
wouldn't that be great?
So much of the UK. I'm not going to say anybody watching, people whose jobs I would like him to have. But it's stark, the difference, the belief in free speech.
Yeah, and it's sort of like an undefying belief in it. There is no room for any sort of maneuver, which I think that this case with the the Centre for Countering Digital Hate, which, like, what does that even mean? I think it's so interesting because how are you going to come to a nation who literally a founding principle is free speech and then start saying that we want to get rid of free speech? Of course they're going to deport him. Why would you go to it's almost like going to Saudi Arabia or something and fighting with something that they completely disagree with. So I think it is interesting. But the simple answer to your question is no, there is no free speech in England. I cannot, if this studio right here was in the UK and I said something, I could go to jail. Here, I can say anything and I won't go to jail. I might get in trouble with Ofcom, but I won't go to jail. And that is a really stark difference that we actually sitting here, I'm a green card, I'm protected by the First Amendment. I can say anything and the American government will stick up for me around the world. That is not the case for most British citizens, which is quite scary.
Genuinely, that blows my mind. As somebody who was literally on the counter, I was on the list of the government were watching during the pandemic.
Right.
I was surveilled and I had to apply for that file that the government was holding on me because I was some sort of threat to national security.
It's crazy. For things you were saying.
You
didn't do anything, but it's for things you were saying. Whereas here, you can say anything, and not only can you say anything, the government will go out of its way to protect you for things you say. I mean, that was the case with the recent Father Ted guy, right?
Graham Linehan.
Right. He one of his arguments that a lot of the stuff he tweeted was while he was in the US, and it's like, actually, if you are here, even as a visitor, if you are here and you tweet something on this soil, you'll be protected by the US government.
And I remind you that when I was being watched by the government, it was a conservative government.
Yeah,
that was
absolutely.
meant to be this free speech, belief in the individual, rubbish. We haven't had that in the UK for a very long time. Eric, are you aware of that?
No.
Are you aware that I was a danger to national security?
No, I'm actually listening to this and I'm like shocked. I'm like, okay, is this a joke? Is this a trick or treat? We just came out of Halloween. I was like, really? You? A threat? Okay, wow.
Exactly. And that's what should make people's blood run cold, simply because I was questioning lockdowns. Because I was questioning the rolling out of vaccines for children that they didn't need, because I was asking questions about a cost benefit of taking a medication that the government was saying you had to have before you went into a nightclub. Simply for asking those questions, because all I ever wanted was an open and honest debate. And that is when I start to feel sentimental about the BBC. I remember that period in time and how they brainwashed the nation, and my sympathy for them dries up quite quickly.
Well, I think we had some of that going on here during the pandemic in terms
you did?
of you saw a lot of high profile people who were saying they weren't taking the vaccine, NBA players, NFL players,
and they got
a lot of questions about should they be taking it, and then of course there was should they be ostracized because they're not, and then having very different opinions given the fact that we're in this pandemic where so many millions of people have died as a result of it, and then is this vaccine safe, is it healthy, who should be taking it, and then of course there was a lot of conspiracy theories. So I think it was just a very dark time. And again, just one of those instances where, again, freedom, transparency, I think, was all being tested. And
Biden was the worst. Biden was horrendous. The restrictions that he was putting onto Zuckerberg and to Facebook, and they've now come out and talked about it, how the White House was on the phone to them saying, you've got to take this down. If the word ivermectin pops up, you take it down. You know, that's not okay.
Well, I do believe that some of these conspiracy theories, I think, had been debunked, and I think it was concerning. And and I do believe it would have been great if everyone wanted to take the vaccine, but if people did not want to take the vaccine, I think that was okay. But I think the idea also of spreading information that was certainly not certified by medical professionals, I think, just made it more problematic.
Well, we're not going to get into that tonight, Eric, but you and I can do that over a bottle of wine one night. Believe me, I've got a lot I can tell you about all that period of time. But that, for me, Thomas, was when the erosion of trust started in the BBC, when I was being asked to not believe my own eyes. And I'm not alone in that. We've got record numbers of people now not paying their licence fee, cancelling their licence fee to the BBC and saying, put me in prison if you want. And it all started then. And Brexit.
Yeah, and I think you raised a good point about the connection between the Facebook and the Biden administration. But I think one of the differences is that was also happening in the UK. Yeah. But in the UK, the people at the BBC have no belief in free speech, so they were immediately like, yes. Meanwhile, the ones at Facebook, actually, even left-wing Americans have a passion for free speech. They were out there saying, I'm not too sure that this is the right thing to do. They were pushing back on the White House. But and one of the things that I think sort of got brushed under because President Trump did so much when he came in is that all of the military people that Biden fired, if you didn't take the vaccine, you got fired by the president. President Trump brought them all back and has given them back pay for the 4 years that they were without work. So he really went out and sort of made amends with the way people were treated. But big differences between the US and the UK.
What should we go to now, fellas? I want to cover another story. I'm sure our viewers are not. I'm sure our viewers are probably. President Trump is demanding the BBC retract the Panorama documentary in which his speech was edited, or he's going to sue for £1 billion. We've said that multiple occasions this evening. Lots more to come. Stay with us. Joining me now in the studio is former senior advisor to President Trump, Jason Miller. Jason, good to see you. Busy few days in the White House, and the relationship between America and the UK being a little fractious right now, you might say. How is the president?
President's doing very well, continues to march ahead and had a great reception at NFL game yesterday. First time in some 40 plus years that a sitting U.S. president has been to an NFL game.
How can that be the case? I saw that. How can no president have been to watch American football in 40 years?
In a regular season game. They've definitely been to Super Bowls. I know President Trump has been, but to a regular season game. I would think if I was president, I'd want to go every weekend. So,
exactly. You might as well get something out of the job, right?
Exactly. You at least have good seats.
So he's under a lot of pressure this week, but not quite as much pressure as the BBC, because he's just put them in an absolute headlock. How determined is he to see justice served here?
He's pretty ticked off, and I think he has every right to be. I mean, keep in mind that, number one, this would have, if the Telegraph and the whistleblower hadn't stepped up here, and if GB News and other folks hadn't made such an issue of this, then the BBC never would have corrected it. And the fact is, they're not mad because they did it. They're mad because they got caught. And by the way, when you have your head of news, you have the head of the network that stepped down over this, that's basically an open admission that you know that you did something really, really wrong here. But as we've seen, President Trump has already taken it to a number of different media outlets who have defamed him or have intentionally gone and edited things in a way to make it look like he said something that he didn't. And by the way, President Trump has won over and over and over. I think the BBC is in real trouble. And keep in mind, this isn't even getting to the fact whether you have the license fees that folks in the UK are then paying to the BBC to then go and defame people like President Trump. And keep in mind what the whistleblower also found, the things, whether it be the anti-Israel bias, whether it be the trans issues that they've been covering up or misreporting. So I think the BBC has a real reckoning coming for them.
And that, I think, is what is so gives the people like me who have massive questions about how the BBC portrays the news to the world. What gives us a sense of relief is that somebody has finally shaken their cage. And it doesn't matter whether it's there'll be people watching this who maybe feel a bit ambivalent about President Trump. He's a very divisive figure. But maybe they're furious about how the BBC handles climate change as a fait accompli. It's man-made and you're all going to die and we've got to change the way we live. Or maybe it's about Brexit and how sniffy the BBC is about Brexit. Or maybe it's about illegal migration and how the BBC always portrays illegal migration as something generous that we have to do. Whatever it is, Donald Trump has swung in here like a saviour to all of those people who want to see justice. Who'd have thought that would be the case?
Never would have thought it. As someone who's spent quite a bit of time in the UK over the years, I know how frustrated people are about what they've seen the BBC doing, and the fact that people have to pay for the BBC to then go and misreport and come up with, as Caroline Levitt and others have said, fake news over and over. And so it's really remarkable that President Trump has brought about this culture change. But as I saw with your great interview with FCC Chairman Brendan Carr earlier, this is the sea change we're seeing here in the United States. As we saw, even whether it be ABC and Disney, and President Trump completely turn around the way that business had been done here with the media, censoring certain groups or putting intentionally misleading news. It's a sea change. So it goes to show you one election can make a difference. I know it's a little more difficult when it comes to the BBC and Ofcom in the UK, but we have to get the process started.
I want to tell you, there's a piece that's just landed online. I want to tell you about this article written by Ed Davey, the leader of the Liberal Democrats in the UK. And he's pointing the finger at one particular... Well, first of all, he's outraged that Donald Trump would wish to disturb the delicate ecosystem of the BBC and the British media landscape. But he's talking about one particular person on the panel, the advisory panel, who is called Mr. Gibb. And he says that Mr. Gibb should have no role in the BBC, no role in appointing the Director General. The government should remove him from the board immediately and end the practice of political appointments, because he's saying that it's this Mr. Gibb who's been saying all along, hang on, we need some balance here. We need some balance. We need to look at these issues from both sides. And now Ed Davey, who's saying politicians shouldn't get involved in the news media, is now saying, as a politician, I want to see a change to the news media. I mean, you can't have it both ways, but that's how it's going to pivot.
Yeah, and that's the way that it's been. I mean, people have been used to for years and years of just the BBC having just one track, and they're going to do it their way. They're trying to influence and shape and mold the news the way that they see it, and there's no recourse. There's no way to push back. They're going to have people in the government or Ofcom defend them at every opportunity. They're almost like the Borg from Star Trek. They're the entity that just can't be pushed around or shifted. But now they've run into an immovable object in President Trump, who's not going to back down.
No. And do you think this is doing damage to the BBC in the eyes of Americans? Because a lot of people are still nostalgic and respect the institution of the BBC.
Well, and keep in mind, it's not completely dissimilar to CNN. I mean, keep in mind, CNN was the first cable network here in the United States. They were really the gold standard for the global 24-hour news cycle. We think back to the first Gulf War and some of the great coverage they had, Bernie Shaw and some of the legendary folks over the years. And now you look at the politicized vehicle that it's become. That's part of the reason why their ratings are down in the absolute toilet. Same thing with the BBC. BBC used to be what was viewed as a highly respected news outlet, but then it became politicized. It became weaponized by the political left. And so to the extent that Americans are paying attention to the BBC, they definitely know now. And again, when you have the head of news, you have the head of the network, they're stepping down in disgrace over what they did, that's just sending up the signal flare that they know they're in trouble. Here's what I don't get, Bev. Why has the BBC not yet apologized to President Trump? They've apologized to members of parliament. They've apologized to their stakeholders, people in their orbit. They haven't apologized to President Trump yet. Now, it sounds like they have until Friday, 5 p.m. U.S. time on the East Coast to go and apologize and retract the intentionally misconstructed interview snippets, the speech snippets they put together. And I tell you, President Trump is not going to back down on this one.
How far will he push it, Jason? If we get to 5 o'clock on Friday and they haven't sufficiently retracted, they haven't complied with this notice to enforce legal, equitable rights, etc. The BBC is on notice, said this letter, and they want, the wording of it is quite specific about the fact that they would like, let me just put it in layman's terms rather than legalese, they want the apology and the retraction to make just as much noise as the original broadcast did. How do they do that to his satisfaction?
Well, they're going to have to come up with something. Otherwise, President Trump is going to own that very nice building downtown that they've put together. And we've already seen with President Trump, I mean, he brought HarperCollins UK to its knees, President Trump and Melania. And so they're not going to back down. And President Trump has already extracted some pretty massive concessions from some of the big media powerhouses here in the U.S. And he's definitely going to do it with the BBC.
Do you think the Prime Minister has been on the phone yet to President Trump to say, can you back off? We can't afford this at the BBC. You're going to cripple our state broadcaster.
I would be surprised if he did. Again, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on the PM or how he operates. Obviously, our political stripes are a little bit different. But I think he knows on this one, the last thing he wants to do is put himself between a bullet and a target. And I think he knows that President Trump is not going to let off on this one.
And how concerned do you think the president would be about the fact that this is taxpayers' money? This is because he has a big place in his heart for British people. He said that on numerous occasions. He said it twice this year on the state visit and when he was in Scotland opening his golf course. Every time he's spoken to by the British media, he says, I want your country to do well. Would his desire to see justice served by the BBC trump his love of the British people?
Well, I think in this case, this is really up to the BBC. It's the issue of whether or not the BBC wants to see this happen. And so they've laid it out in very stark terms in the letter, just very clear. Apologize, retract it, and come up with some sort of amends. And they need to do that. It seems right now they have their heads buried in the sand and they just think it's going to go away. It's not.
Just tell us a little bit, Jason, if you will, about the role of the BBC now within the White House and access to the administration. There is a sort of arrogance, dare I say it, sometimes around the BBC News organisation that they believe they have a right to be in the briefing room on one of those seats with Caroline Levitt. They have a right to probably be able to knock on the door of the press secretary and talk to her about what is their position here now? They must be on very shaky ground.
Well, being on shaky ground would probably be a step up from where they are right now. They're not in a good place. And again, you talk about the BBC and the rights that they feel that they have. What about President Trump's rights? To not have a speech of his be edited up to make it look like he's saying something that he's not. Isn't that a fundamental right, whether you're in the UK, whether you're in the United States? So we shouldn't have this intentional fake news that's going on. And so, I don't think the BBC is in a pretty good position. And quite frankly, it's not just in the US. I mean, you see the papers in the UK or see all the headlines or you watch the TV. I mean, they're imploding in real time as we speak. I would be surprised if you don't see a whole bunch of folks quitting or resigning from the BBC, maybe going to work for a different news outlet. I mean, it's going to really become a scarlet letter.
And the thing is, this administration, this term for Donald Trump has been very different to the first one. And there are all sorts of people in the UK and the US who will now quietly say, I like Donald Trump. Trump, don't tell anyone. It's become kind of the guilty secret. And that is partly, in a no small way, because of the way that BBC still depict him as the punchline to the joke. So is he aware of that, would you say, that his image has been, you are always in the UK, you're steered in one direction, and it's not just in the UK, let's face it, it happens all over the world, but even in this term, you're still being nudged by the BBC to see President Trump as something that maybe, well, he would certainly say it, that he is not.
I think he has a pretty good sense, and again, I draw the corollary between the BBC and CNN. The president knows that they have a very biased agenda, as we saw from the documentary that they put together and intentionally spliced up. Clearly, the president's received a number of negative questions from the press corps, specifically from the BBC. So he knows what bent that they're coming out with. And of course, he's seen the headlines, whether it be on the .com or whether it be on the airwaves. So I think he's fully aware of where the BBC is coming from. But I don't know if he thought that he would ever see this, for them to intentionally go through and have a whistleblower call it out and say they did it intentionally.
I would love to know what his reaction was when he first saw it. When he first saw that clip put together by the Daily Telegraph, by Gordon Rayner at the newspaper, who'd seen the dossier and compared the two clips, and we've shown it multiple times on GB News this week. We're just seeing it here. I'd love to know how he felt when he saw that.
I could tell you, but then I get GB News in trouble with Ofcom, and so I can't say it on the airways.
Because of the language?
Because of the language. Let's just say that the president would be upset, whether it be the BBC or any other news outlet, to go and do that. Because here's the thing that he knows: if they're doing that to President Trump, what are they doing to Britons? What are they doing to folks in the UK who maybe don't have as big of a microphone? It's media outlets will do it as long as they can get away with it.
Yeah, interesting. Can I just ask you, Jason, about the shutdown here in America, to explain to people in the UK who don't understand this? This is because the Republicans and the Democrats could not come to a deal about the budget for the next, what, is it for the next 6 months or the next year?
Well, it's in a normal world, it would be for a year.
Right.
But of course, it's been years since we've actually passed a full budget on time. I think it's going back maybe 17 years or something like that. It's been quite a while. And I know this entire concept must seem absurd to people around the world, and it is, quite frankly. I mean, why you're shutting down the government because you can't come up with an agreement? I mean, that's malpractice, and quite frankly, it's malpractice for everybody. But what President Trump and the Republicans said, let's pass what we call a continuing resolution. In nerd beltway talk, they call it a CR. Just keep funding government at the current levels. You can come back and figure it out. Democrats are trying to hold everyone hostage for additional benefits through Obamacare, essentially for health care benefits for people. And everyone was saying, no, just open up government. Instead, they've literally thrown transit into chaos. When we see the airwaves, you've had members of the military going without pay. So, Bev, we have folks in the military who've been in line for food banks because they haven't had enough money to get by. You're going to make our soldiers go and do that. You've had government workers who've had to go stand in lines for food banks. You go to the airports and you wonder why all these flights are being canceled. Yeah. Anyone who's there, by the way, they're working for no money right now. Now, they will get some benefits in the back, but this didn't need to happen. Unnecessary. It was unneeded. And the fact that Democrats completely collapsed without officially getting anything shows this whole thing was
and we're looking at live pictures here now, Jason, in the Senate. So these are the discussions which are going on. And how close are they then to actually signing all the paperwork, getting this over the line and getting everything open again?
So they're going to need the House to come back and go and vote on it from their end, because the bill that was sent from the House to the Senate originally has now been changed. And I believe Wednesday is the earliest that that's going to happen. So we're still a couple days away from government being able to reopen. But we need to get government up and running. We have our Thanksgiving, one of our biggest holidays, coming up here just in a couple of weeks. And so we have got to do this. It's way too much chaos for the U.S. And by the way, it's hurting the economy as well.
OK. We're just seeing here that the US Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer has apparently faced calls to step aside this evening. Should he?
he's in real trouble. So the whole reason why Schumer was doing this isn't so much that he believed it, but he believes that the extremist left within the Democrat base, so Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, might go and challenge him in a primary, which, by the way, she probably will, and she'll probably beat him. Schumer's in real trouble. So the folks in the middle say, why did you hold us all hostage, make us look bad, especially for the Democrats who are up for re-election or who are running for a democratically held seat in 2026. They're upset. You have the folks on the far left who are saying, why did you cave? And Schumer's really a man on an island right now. I don't think he has many friends, and I think he's going to be the big punching bag, and they're going to take it out on him.
Okay, fascinating, Jason, as usual. Well, we can't wait till Friday at 5 o'clock. We're going to be covering this story and see what happens then. Friday, that's going to be 5 p.m. Washington time. That is 10 p.m. in the UK. And that is the point at which the BBC have to show their offer to Donald Trump.
Have the popcorn ready.
We will. Thank you so much, Jason Miller there. Now we're going to have a look at tomorrow's front pages before they hit the shelves. This is The Late Show live only on GB News. Quick look at the weather.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Yet more windy and wet weather is expected today, particularly across western parts of the UK. The hills of southwest England, South Wales, southwest Scotland and Northern Ireland seeing quite a soaking as spells of rain push north and east across the UK. Briefly drier across the southern third, although staying cloudy and in some places with further spots of rain. But the strong wind coming in from the southwest will send another band of persistent wet weather into South Wales and the southwest of England by the afternoon. Driest and clearest in the far north of Scotland, 10 degrees here, elsewhere mid-teens. So despite the wet and windy weather, it is actually very mild for the time of year. Now, across northern Scotland, well, that's the place to be because we're going to end the day with clear spells, 1 or 2 showers, but otherwise mostly dry weather. As this spell of rain moves through central Scotland, another bout of wet weather pushing through Northern Ireland into the southwest of Scotland, reaching the central belt around 6 or 7 p.m. And then this wet weather moving through western England and Wales, a very soggy end of the day for Cardiff, for Exeter, and then that sweeps through the Midlands into eastern England through the evening, although fizzling out, so not much rain really for the southeast. A very mild night for the vast majority with that strong wind and areas of cloud in the south. Temperatures staying up at 14 or 15 Celsius, single figures further north, and having seen a dry day in northern Scotland on Tuesday, we're going to see spells of rain through Wednesday and a strong wind developing, but this wind is coming from the north, so it's going to turn colder through the day across Shetland and then eventually the north of the mainland as well as Orkney. Some of that rain turning to snow over the tops of the mountains, for example. A clear slot in the middle across Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, northern England, but further wet weather in the south where it's going to be very mild once again.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Welcome back to The Late Show Live with me, Bev Turner. Let's have a look at the newspaper front pages, shall we? The Telegraph, they are, of course, leading with Trump to sue the BBC for $1 billion. It's the biggest story in town here in America and also, of course, there in the UK. And the Daily Telegraph is obviously owning that. This is a story that they broke. The Daily Mail are leading with Trump telling the BBC, grovel or I will sue you for $1 billion, with a picture of Deborah Turness there. And the Mail saying why the BBC suits might live to regret turning on Hurricane Deborah. The Sun is leading with the BBC's $1 billion bungle as well. Obviously, this is just a huge story all around the world. Trump's $1 billion lawsuit threatening over lies. They say The Guardian, BBC board member with Tory link, led the charge over claims of bias. And that has this opinion piece written by the Liberal Democrat leader, Ed Davey, which I was just talking about a little earlier. Of course, it's not the fault of the BBC. It's the fault of one of the board members who happens to be Conservative. The Times is leading with BBC is told to say sorry or Trump will sue you for $1 billion. They're also talking about Rachel Reeves hinting at lifting the 2-child benefit cap, as well as lifting taxes. The Daily Express, they are leading with "You will pay the price for vicious OAP tax raid." Really bad news at the moment for pensioners if they have a little private pension pot that they were looking forward to spending. And the Mirror are leading with Prince William on Kate's cancer battle. "We told the kids everything," they say, the good and the bad. This is Prince William, who's opened up about the challenges of dealing with cancer when you have young children. Let's go to journalist and broadcaster Benjamin Bosworth from our London studio, and of course my panel are still here, Eric Ham and Thomas Corbett-Dillon. Benjamin, what would you like to talk about as our honorary Brit down the line tonight? Tell me the story that's caught your eye.
I mean, there is only really one story in town on those front pages you just went through, and that is the BBC crisis. Now, as you've been covering all night, there's the billion-dollar lawsuit threat, but there are two other angles. So the newspaper, where I've worked for many years, that goes with future of the BBC licence fee in jeopardy. So it reports that staff inside the BBC are saying that the mood is dark, that they're scared for the future of the corporation, because actually this has come at really bad timing, because right now the BBC is negotiating its financial future, whether the licence fee remains, how much it is, how much public funding they get. So it comes at a really dangerous time, and Nigel Farage said yesterday, on Monday, he said that he would get rid of the licence fee as a mandatory payment and make it a Netflix-style model.
Let me bring in my panel then, Eric and Thomas, on this. Do you think the BBC would work, Thomas, if it was a subscription model? I don't like subscriptions. I think probably the one thing I like less than a one-off payment to the government to run BBC is a subscription model. Hate the idea.
Yeah, well, you know, I think it could have worked if they'd have done it maybe like 10 years ago when they had the opportunity to do it. Because if you think about some of the great old shows that the BBC have, that Americans would pay the $9.99 a month, or Australians, New Zealanders, you know how hard it is to watch BBC content in this country? So they really missed the trick there. I think now there's too many platforms. No one's going to be wanting to do that. But as you say, they might be in a lot of trouble with a $1 billion fee. I like Jason Miller saying that they might be Trump might be putting his name on the BBC broadcasting house over there. That could be quite fun.
And also the idea that he might call the ballroom. It might end up being the BBC ballroom. It should be maybe called the taxpayers' ballroom, Eric, if he does use that money to pay for it.
You know, the last thing I want to see is the BBC actually take a massive fall as a result of this. I do believe that not just the BBC, but most media, even here in this country especially, need to come under an increased microscope. And we know that President Donald Trump has certainly waged war with a number of media outlets. And I think what we're seeing take place right now is no different. But in terms of the model itself, the fact that we are talking about a public entity, I do believe it opens up a number of questions, especially in terms of what you're talking about, such as this Netflix model, which might be a direction for the BBC to be moving into, especially if, in fact, there are, much larger questions about how, in fact, they are actually comporting the news that is being pushed out to
And I think there's a generational issue here with the BBC, isn't there, Benjamin? Because I was explaining to my 16-year-old that you have to pay for it, even if you don't want to watch it. And she was baffled by that, from that generation. She said, "What? I don't watch it." She said, "I never watch the BBC. I don't watch anything on the BBC." I said, "Well, tough. You still have to pay 174 quid if you want it to watch other channels in the UK. Otherwise, you're going to get a knock on the door and possibly go to prison." That is beyond the comprehension of young people, isn't it? That you would have to do that.
I mean, the BBC has lost more than 1 million licence fee payers in recent years. So clearly there are fewer people willing to pay it or wanting to pay it. But at the same time, I actually think the advertising model of media is the one that's fading, because now it's a lot more common. You have Netflix, you have Now TV, you have Amazon Prime, all sorts of outlets where it's normal to pay a subscription each month, which is how many people pay for the licence fee. They pay about £12 a month. And so actually I think the model the BBC runs on has come into vogue, not out of fashion.
All right, let's move on to another story then, gentlemen. I want to look at Meghan Markle's new show, Meghan Sussex, as she insists we call her now. Her new show, it's called With Love, Meghan, Holiday Celebration. So that's the still image that we have from it. It's a holiday celebration. Benjamin, what is conspicuously missing from that
Prince
trailer?
Harry? Prince Harry?
No. Christmas? How about Christmas? Given that it comes out in December and there are bits of Christmas tree on the tablecloth, which I've never liked doing that. I've never liked it when you put bits of Christmas tree on the tablecloth. It leaves pine needles blooming everywhere. You've got nowhere to put your cranberry sauce. Where are you going to put your bread sauce with all that faffing around on the table? Nobody literally... And also, I'm sorry, those candles are a bit of a fire hazard. She's going to cause a forest fire on that table. It's just ridiculous, isn't it? This is just Meghan again. Rather than just dealing with the tradition of Christmas, she's trying to appeal to everyone. Let's just be super woke. Let's not upset anyone. Let's not offend anyone. Let's just put it as a holiday celebration. And what that means is she's out of touch with the rest of the world, because Christianity, it turns out, has never been so popular, Benjamin.
Look, I'm afraid I think the obsession with hating on Meghan Markle or Meghan Sussex is totally unhinged. I mean, look, here she is. She's a private person. She's making private income from a private US business, making a show that clearly people want to watch because they keep recommissioning it. Now, I don't love that it says holidays instead of Christmas, but dare I put this to the American on your panel, isn't that just an Americanism to say happy holidays? It's not really anything about the event itself. We would say Christmas, Americans say holidays.
Eric, over to you.
Well, also, too, I think we have to remember, in the United States, not only are we talking about Christmas, but another very, very big holiday that's coming up, of course, is Thanksgiving. And that is perhaps the biggest travel holiday, even bigger than Christmas itself. And so I think maybe what Meghan is looking at is not necessarily just capturing Christmas, but, of course, the entirety of the holiday season, which, of course, encompasses Thanksgiving as well.
Although, Thomas, whether you noticed, I think it starts on Netflix in December, which is after Thanksgiving. I quite like your logic, Eric, but maybe it wasn't ready, so they were trying. Maybe that was their intention. It just wasn't ready, or it wasn't good enough, and they've had to boot it into December, Thomas.
Yeah, and I also think, if you actually just look at the sort of content that they're making, this like Martha Stewart style shows, they're not really that popular anymore. No one seems to be making this. It just seems she's pushing this thing that I think is kind of weird. But one thing I really find interesting about Meghan is when I first moved to the US 5 years ago, and as a Brit, every single American I spoke to wanted to talk about Meghan. They loved her. They were like, she's amazing, we're obsessed with her, we love her. And it changed so quickly to the point now, if they ever even bring up Meghan, which they rarely do, it's in a negative light. So I'm like, you've lost the Brits, you've lost the Americans. So I really don't know who is tuning in to find out, what is Meghan's secrets for Christmas? Does anyone even care? I'm really not sure what this is. What I really think this is her pals at Netflix giving a bit of payoff to say, here's some budget that we've got. You can go and spend that to, support her. I really don't know who the audience is.
No, I think you're right. But she doesn't know who she is, so she can't know who her audience is, right? Now, I want to play this footage. So there was a gathering in the Oval Office last week, and this was a huge announcement from President Trump. And it's about a weight loss drug company, the Fat Jabs, as we call them. And it was executives from Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk. Now, I don't know if we've got the footage. I think we have, because one of the gentlemen in the room fainted. He's fine. Have a look at it.
And creating high-value jobs. But today we... Oh, are you okay? Gordon, you okay? Yeah.
If you're listening on the radio, he's got his late 60s, early 70s, and he goes to the floor. Luckily, there were several doctors in that room. Dr. Oz was in there. Robert Kennedy went out to get some extra help. Well, it turns out that the guy was there because he's on these Fat Jabs, Benjamin, and he was meant to be the good advert for look how great they do. And he passed out. I mean, what does that tell us about these products? It's like it's a PR disaster for them.
Yeah, it's definitely a very bad look. In fact, the fact it's made global news is probably leading to crisis meetings in that company. I think, these jabs, I think, are miraculous on the face of it. We know that people are losing weight.
Yeah.
They're managed to stopping things like alcoholism, as also people are losing all sorts of desires, not just food, from taking these jabs. So there's a lot of positives about it. But the question is, and maybe you'd bring this back to some vaccines, but this is a relatively new type of medicine, of type of technology, and so some of the effects on some people are not properly tested. The flip side is that there are billions, tens of billions, must be hundreds of billions of dollars that are being generated from this. I think the main one is Danish, and it is now the equivalent to the Danish economy as Nokia was to the Finnish economy. So I don't think these fat jabs are going to go anywhere soon.
No, Eric, what do you think about the fat jabs? Because Bobby Kennedy actually said they have a place. He said they're not the silver bullet, but they have a place in helping fix the health of this country.
Yeah, there's this one drug, it's called Ozempic, and I think it's for people with diabetes, but it also helps, in some cases, it helps people with weight loss. And I think because we have seen so many people taking that drug, not necessarily to curb diabetes, but also to lose weight. And I think now with the popularity of that, and now you got other pharmaceutical companies like Eli Lilly trying to get into that business. And as we said, we're talking about billions upon billions of dollars. And so certainly not a good way you want to roll this out, but still, I think there will be a massive market for these drugs.
Thomas, do you know, I know so many people on these jabs, do you?
I do, and I love this because every time I see my friends, they get skinnier and skinnier. I'm like, wow, everyone's on, as we call it here, the Zempi. As everyone's on the Zempi now. I said they're doing well. I love having skinny friends. But I think it's
so shallow.
I know, isn't that great? No, they're getting skinnier than me now. That's the problem. I've got to catch up. But I really like this whole situation. I thought it was quite entertaining. Sad for the guy. He's fine, obviously. But you know what I also loved? RFK has seen so many sort of, the Kennedy curses around him. He dipped as soon as anything sort of little rumble, he said, I'm out, I'm a Kennedy, I can't be around any of this. So he ran out the room. So I love RFK, he's a great guy.
I know, he's seen so many people collapse unexpectedly recently that he's just used to it. He's like, oh, there goes another one, and he walked out. He did have to defend himself because they depicted him quite badly in the press for doing that, said he wasn't caring. But he would say, no, I was just going to go and get help. Benjamin Butterworth, thank you so much for joining me this evening. Eric Ham as well, and Thomas Corbett-Dillon. Thank you at home as well for staying with me this evening. It is going to be a huge news week here in Washington, D.C. Whatever happens here is going to affect the BBC. It's going to affect you at home. So do make sure you stay with GB News all week. I'll be here tomorrow night, midnight UK, 7 p.m. Eastern. See you then. Sleep well.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Yet more windy and wet weather is expected today, particularly across western parts of the UK. The hills of southwest England, South Wales, southwest Scotland and Northern Ireland seeing quite a soaking as spells of rain push north and east across the UK. Briefly drier across the southern third, although staying cloudy and in some places with further spots of rain. But the strong wind coming in from the southwest will send another band of persistent wet weather into South Wales and the southwest of England by the afternoon. Driest and clearest in the far north of Scotland, 10 degrees here, elsewhere mid-teens. So despite the wet and windy weather, it is actually very mild for the time of year. Now, across northern Scotland, well, that's the place to be because we're going to end the day with clear spells, 1 or 2 showers, but otherwise mostly dry weather. As this spell of rain moves through central Scotland, another bout of wet weather pushing through Northern Ireland into the southwest of Scotland, reaching the central belt around 6 or 7 p.m. And then this wet weather moving through western England and Wales, a very soggy end to the day for Cardiff, for Exeter, and then that sweeps through the Midlands into eastern England through the evening, although fizzling out, so not much rain really for the southeast. A very mild night for the vast majority with that strong wind and areas of cloud in the south. Temperatures staying up at 14 or 15 Celsius, single figures further north, and having seen a dry day in northern Scotland on Tuesday, we're going to see spells of rain through Wednesday and a strong wind developing, but this wind is coming from the north, so it's going to turn colder through the day across Shetland and then eventually the north of the mainland as well as Orkney. Some of that rain turning to snow over the tops of the mountains, for example. A clear start in the middle across Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, northern England, but further wet weather in the south, where it's going to be very mild once again.
Today, clouds overhead. Total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world. Am I allowed to talk then? No, that's it.